Hello, hello, hello. I am your host OCL, and welcome back to One Century Later. Today we'll be taking a look at all events from February 28th to March 6th, 1926. As with last week, all of my sources are in the description down below. Sunday, February 28th, 1926. The island of Urta Tagay was transferred to the Emirate of Afghanistan after being in the Soviet Union's control since 1920. However, the Urta Tagay conflict, which had been going on since November 27th, continued until full Afghan sovereignty was granted on August 15th. Pope Pius XI published the encyclical Rerum Ecclesiae, calling on an increase in the number of clergymen and missionaries and admonishing white missionaries for their prejudice against other missionaries, stating if one discovers an extreme lack of the ability to understand among those who live in the very heart of certain barbarous countries, this is largely due to the conditions under which they exist, for since their daily needs are so limited, they are not often called upon to make use of their intellects. Monday, March 1st, 1926. Presidential elections were held in Brazil, with Washington Luiz winning 98% of the votes, placing Arthur Bernandes as the president of Brazil. The trial of Anthony Bimba came to a close after 6 days. Bimba, the last person in the U.S. to be charged with the crime of blasphemy, was acquitted on all charges of blasphemy but was convicted for sedition. Bimba was fined $100 for his sedition conviction, however the fine was dropped after appeal. The charges of blasphemy were based on the 1697 law in Massachusetts, which stated that blasphemy would be punished by either at most 3 years in prison or at most a $300 fine. Bimbo was alleged to have said, quote, "There are still enough fools who believe in God. The priests tell us there is a soul. Why, I have a soul, but that soul is on my shoe." Tuesday, March 2nd, 1926. In response to the League of Nations discussing granting a temporary council seat to Poland, the German Chancellor, Hans Luther, gave a speech stating that Germany's entry into the League was to be contingent on no other changes being made to the League's membership. Luther also stated that if Poland, who was considered hostile by Germany, was to be granted this seat, Germany would have no choice but to withdraw its application to the League of Nations. In response, Poland was not granted this temporary seat. U.S. President Calvin Coolidge signed the then largest peacetime appropriation bill in American history, allocating $868,281,501 to the U.S. Department of Treasury and the U.S. Department of the Post Office. The Nicaraguan newspaper, La Prensa, was founded in Managua, Nicaragua. Today, the newspaper is the oldest newspaper in Nicaragua. However, due to embargoes, the newspaper is now purely digital. Wednesday, March 3rd, 1926. Germany and Afghanistan signed a treaty of friendship ratifying the Friendship and Trade Agreement of January 24th, 1916, which had intended to weaken the British influence over Afghanistan. Thursday, March 4th, 1926. Jia Dayao, the acting premier of the Republic of China following the resignation of Zhu Xingyi on February 15th, reorganized the government of China, officially becoming the premier of the Republic of China, naming himself as Minister of War, and naming former premier Yan Huiqing as foreign minister. Prime Minister of Norway, Johan Ludwig Malwinkel, resigned following a lost vote on restrictive economic measures in the Storting, the Supreme Legislature of Norway. Ivar Like was appointed as the new Prime Minister by King Haakon VII, effective the following day. At 1 a.m. local time, Hungarian Gyula Antal entered the MK coffee house in Budapest, Hungary. Shortly thereafter, he committed suicide by shooting in the bathroom. Antal left behind a crossword puzzle whose solution would reveal the reason of his death. The puzzle has never been solved, even 100 years later. I was not able to find a picture of it, otherwise I would have it on screen right now. Following the November 14th resignation of the government of Hendrikus Collin in the Netherlands, Dirk Jan de Geer created the new government with himself as the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. The rest of his cabinet was filled with members from multiple different parties and was accepted as the new government by Queen Wilhelmina. Zizi Lambrino filed a lawsuit in Paris, France against Prince Carol II of Romania, 10 million francs, stating that she was still the wife to Prince Carl and entitled to money to support herself and their son, Carlo Lambrino. Lambrino was basing this suit off of a love letter written to her after the annulment of their marriage in 1919, which stated, "I want this letter to be a recognition on my part of my fatherhood of your son and an avowal that despite the annulment of our marriage, I have never ceased to consider myself your husband." The newspaper United States Daily, created by David Lawrence in Washington, D.C., began publication. The newspaper subscription cost $10 a year and would continue publication until 1933. Friday, March 5th, 1926. Nothing of historical precedent happened on this day. Saturday, March 6th, 1926. The government of France, led by Prime Minister Aristide Briand, fell after failing to pass a financial bill by a vote of 274 against and 221 for. Briand delivered the cabinet's resignation to President Dumouriez, although the resignation was not made official until July, ending Briand's fifth term as Prime Minister of France. And that is all. See you next week for all events from Sunday, March 5th, 1926 to Saturday, March 13th, 1926. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.